Hey, welcome to part 3 of our teaching on church membership. We want to lay a foundation for what it actually means to be a member in the local church by looking at what the Bible has to say about this topic. Last week, we talked about the purpose of membership. Membership is a legal requirement. Membership creates safety in our journey of discipleship in matters of sin, and membership helps us grow. If you haven't already, I'd encourage you to check that teaching out. You can find it in our page on YouTube. Today, I want to talk about what membership looks like here at Cornerstone, uniquely in our context. What are we committing to as members in Cornerstone? Some of you might know this, but I'm a member at a local gun range. And in my free time, I head there for recreational shooting, target practice, and so on. But in order to become a member at my range, I had to meet certain requirements, prerequisites. I had to make a number of commitments, and I had to continue to meet those requirements in order to maintain my membership. In other words, it's not a free ride. And this is a common requirement in any organization that requires membership. Think about a few examples. If you're a nurse, in order to practice, you must meet certain requirements and renew your CPR and your first aid certification every single year. I know my mom would always get annoyed about having to redo it every year when she already knew the basics, but it's a good reminder, she would always say. It might save someone's life. If you're a teacher, you are required to have so many professional development days in a year. You must take ongoing training. You must be actively teaching in order to maintain your credentials. At my gun range, I pay my annual dues, I attend safety briefings, I participate in members' meetings, and stay up to date on changes to club policies to act in a safe way, and so on. In any organization, membership comes with prerequisites and ongoing commitments. And this is the same for church membership. So what does it look like here at Cornerstone? In order to be a member at Cornerstone, we have 2 basic prerequisites and 3 ongoing commitments as outlined by our local church constitution and by the scriptures. Let's talk about the prerequisites first. Number 1, you're a follower of Jesus. That is, you've given your life to Jesus. You have become a Christian. And we encourage you, if you haven't already done so, to get water baptized and to show that transformation publicly. Number 2, the second prerequisite is that you agree to abstain from sin. Now, we talked about this one last week. Obviously, we're not sinless people. All of us are broken. And though we do our best, sin will rear its ugly head in our lives from time to time. The point is not that you need to be perfect, but rather, like the Apostle Paul says in Philippians chapter 3, verse 2, not that I've already obtained this or have already arrived at my goal, but I press on to take hold of that for which Christ Jesus took hold of me. In other words, we are not living in a habit or a pattern of sin any longer. We're not making excuses for this, but we are actively seeking to move forwards to overcome this in our walk with Christ. So those are the 2 prerequisites for membership at Cornerstone. And then we come to 3 ongoing commitments. But before we look at them, let me just remind you of the purpose of church membership. The goal of church membership ultimately is to help people become fully devoted followers of Jesus Christ, disciples. While we recognize that committing to these practices may seem like a lot to some people, it's important to understand that they are consistently demonstrated and taught throughout the scriptures as essential practices in the life of a disciple. Not every person who demonstrates these practices is a disciple of Jesus, but every disciple of Jesus will demonstrate these practices. And as we seek to make fully devoted disciples of Jesus Christ, we want to encourage every member of our church to fully commit. At the same time, we recognize that everyone's at a different place in their journey of discipleship, and some people may not feel ready to make those commitments or to renew their membership today, and that's okay. You are still loved, valued, and invited to join us on this journey of faith. And at any time when you feel ready to make that next step, make those commitments, become a member, then know we're ready to help you do it. So very simply today, what are these ongoing commitments we're making? There are 3 practices that we commit to. As members of Cornerstone, I commit to attend, support, and contribute. Number 1, I commit to attend Cornerstone Sunday service on a consistent basis. Now, COVID has obviously affected this in a number of different ways. And, online gathering is a valid way to engage with us when restrictions are in place or you're unable to attend because of sickness or work. But there's also been large periods of time this year when COVID was at an all-time low. At one point, we had 0 active cases in the province, and we were still observing public health protocols as a church. And so when we find ourselves in a place like that, I find no reason for members of our church to not join us for the in-person service. When it comes to it, at the end of the day, the church gathers. And watching online is not the same thing as attending in person. The author of Hebrews writes about this. Hebrews chapter 10, verse 24 to 25. He says, "And let us consider how we may spur one another on towards love and good deeds, not giving up meeting together, as some are in the habit of doing, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day approaching." The author says that we must make the gathering a high priority in our lives and not give it up. Why? Because there is a purpose. And the purpose is this: we gather to encourage our hearts by His Spirit, to fill our minds with His truth, and to strengthen our hands through prayer and support of others for the work that lies ahead. Attending church in person is a requirement for membership. Now, that doesn't need to be every week, though I would encourage that. And understand, there's grace in this. As I know many of us work jobs that don't allow us to be here consistently or for health reasons can't make it out. But as restrictions allow, once a month is really the bare minimum. And if you haven't been to an in-person gathering the last 6 months, then I really challenge you to ask yourself, what's keeping me from attending? Not just Sunday morning either, but Sunday night gatherings and midweek groups or potlucks, prayer meetings, and so on. As the author of Hebrews says, let's spur one another on to love and good deeds by gathering together. That's the first commitment. I will attend Cornerstone. Secondly, I will support Cornerstone financially by tithing 10% of my income to God through Cornerstone. Now, one of the common pushbacks I hear about this one is that tithing is an Old Testament concept. It's not in the New Testament. But that simply isn't true. Look at what Jesus himself had to say about it in Matthew chapter 23, verse 23. He said to the Pharisees, the religious people, he said, "What sorrow awaits you teachers of the religious law, you Pharisees, hypocrites! For you are careful to tithe even the tiniest income from your herb gardens, but you ignore the most important aspects of the law, justice, mercy, and faith. You should tithe, yes, but do not neglect the more important things." Jesus says, you guys are tithing, yes, and you should do that. Don't miss that. Jesus affirms the tithe, but you're not loving people, and that's the real problem. For many of us, the opposite is true. We have no problem loving people. We have a really hard time giving up finances. For you, Jesus would say, yes, keep loving people, but don't neglect to give God what's rightfully His, the first 10%. But there are also those of us for whom tithing is no problem at all. You've done it for years and you're faithful in giving your 10%. As a result, God has blessed you for that. And so for you, the call is to move beyond the tithe, to not use your extra to increase your standard of living, but to ask God, how can I use what you've given me to love and serve other people? Yes, you tithe, but have you neglected love and mercy? The principle here is not how much we give, but the state of our hearts towards God and other people. And the purpose of this commitment for us is to not only support the day-to-day ministry of the church, but to help us grow as individuals in generosity, in love, and in trust. It's about changing our hearts. And if we're struggling to give regularly, how can we get back on track in accordance with Jesus' teachings? Paul gives us some great advice. 1 Corinthians chapter 16, 1-2. He says, "Now about the collection for the Lord's people, do what I told the Galatian churches to do. On the first day of every week, each one of you should set aside a sum of money in keeping with your income, saving it up so that when I come, no collections will have to be made. In keeping with your income, set aside a small amount each week, 2%, 5%, maybe 7%. Start there. See how your budget allows. But then, if you really want to see God's hand in your life, put into the test. Give the full 10%. Just see what happens. He's very clear in Malachi. Bring the whole tithe into the storehouse, that there may be food in my house. Test me in this, says the Lord Almighty, and see if I will not throw open the floodgates of heaven and pour out so much blessing that there will not be enough room to store it. As members at Cornerstone, what do? Number 1, we attend. Number 2, we support. And number 3, we contribute to the mission of Cornerstone by serving others and going to people far from God to show them His love. Listen, we have a mission as a church. We have a purpose and a reason for existing. This ain't no cruise ship. This is a battleship. And it's all hands on deck as we do everything short of sin to reach and save the lost. As we expect then that members of our church will contribute to the mission of Cornerstone by serving and getting involved. Now, for some of us, because of age or life circumstances, we're not able to serve physically on a Sunday morning, and that's okay. But what you can do is pray. You can encourage others. You can pick up the phone and invite people to church. You can attend a group. You can bake for families in our church. You can write encouraging letters to people. You can visit lonely individuals. If you set your mind to it, you can find a way to serve with your gifts in the local church. It doesn't need to look like doing kids ministry or helping behind a computer or shaking hands at the door. All of those are good. I love those team members, and those are important aspects of the church. It doesn't need to look like that, but it does need to look like something. The Apostle Paul said it like this in Ephesians chapter 4, verse 7. He said, "However, God has given each of us a special gift through the generosity of Christ. We each have a special gift to make a difference." Peter echoes him by saying in 1 Peter 4:10, "Each of you should use whatever gift you have received to serve others as faithful stewards of God's grace in its various forms." All of us have gifts, abilities, and opportunities to love and serve people. And as members of Cornerstone, we commit ourselves to contribute to the mission in whatever way we can. And the purpose of this commitment is very simple. It's to equip us and mobilize us to reach people far from God. It's more than just serving on Sunday morning. No, Sunday is the training ground for an entire life on mission, a life of purpose with purpose. As members of Cornerstone, what do? We commit to Jesus Christ by committing to the local church. We commit to attend in person regularly. We commit to support the church financially. We commit to participate in the mission by serving so that together we might reach people far from God and make disciples of Jesus Christ. So that's it. And that wraps up our teaching series on church membership today. And there's 2 next steps I'd love for you to consider. Number 1, for those of us who are already members at Cornerstone, I would hope that as you have come to a fresh understanding about what church membership is, that you would renew your commitment today as a member at Cornerstone. We are renewing our commitment to Jesus Christ and His church by renewing our membership. And number 2, for those of you who have been attending Cornerstone for some time but who are not yet members, I hope that as you have begun to recognize the value of church membership and the call of Jesus Christ to live in community, that you would consider becoming a member today. Either way, the application forms have been emailed out and are available by request for anybody who is interested. Well, as we conclude today, let me leave you with this, the words of the Apostle Paul in Ephesians chapter 4, verse 1-6. He says this to us, the local church: "As a prisoner for the Lord, then, I urge you to live a life worthy of the calling to which you have received. Be completely humble and gentle. Be patient, bearing with one another in love." Verse 3, "Make every effort to keep the unity of the Spirit through the bond of peace. There is one body and one Spirit, just as you were called to one hope when you were called. One Lord, one faith, one baptism, one God and Father of all, who is over all and through all and in all." Today, hear this. You are called. You are loved. You are invited to become a member of God's church. And hey, as we wrap this up here today, know as well that my door is always open. If you want to grab coffee or connect, ask any questions you might have about this, I'd be more than happy to meet with you because we know as a church, we are better together.